Hi everyone, welcome back to Mr. Sleepy Crime. I know many of you use this video to sleep, so before you drift off, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always incredible to see how far this sleepy little community stretches across the globe. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. So, get comfortable. Let the rain carry your thoughts and let's jump into tonight's stories. Story 1. The tragic story of Marta Bednarczyk, a mother of 3, allegedly murdered by a 13-year-old girl. The victim suffered stab wounds to her face, neck, and back. Marta Bednarczyk had spent her life caring for those she loved. Her children were at the heart of everything she did, her days woven with the simple joys and struggles that define motherhood. To those who knew her, Marta was not just another name in a town's history, she was a sister, a friend, a neighbor. Someone whose presence made the world a little warmer. March 10th. A night like any other, yet it would soon be marked in history, etched into the memories of those who lived in Wellingborough. The kind of night that starts with quiet routines, the rustling of curtains as windows are drawn shut, the hum of distant traffic fading into the silence. People winding down, unaware that, just beyond their walls, something irreversible was taking shape. When the emergency call came in, the details were few. A house fire. That was all the dispatcher had. The urgency in the caller's voice was unmistakable, but the full weight of what lay behind that fire remained unknown. Firefighters arrived swiftly, the glow of flames flickering against the darkened sky, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. The house, a modest home nestled in the heart of the neighborhood, was battling against an enemy that moved without mercy, devouring walls, creeping into every corner. Smoke billowed out, thick and suffocating, curling into the air as sirens wailed through the quiet streets. And then, the discovery. As responders navigated the charred remains, pushing through scorched doorways and collapsed ceilings, they found her. Marta. Lying there. Still. Not lost to the fire, as they might have expected. No. The wounds told a different story. A deeper, more chilling story. Stab wounds. To her face. Her neck. Her back. Deliberate. Calculated. The kind of violence that doesn't come from an accident, but from intent. A crime scene frozen in time, every detail speaking to an act that had unraveled before the flames could claim her. The fire, it seemed, was meant to do something else. To erase evidence. To blur the lines of what had really happened inside that house. But nothing could hide the truth for long. Forensic teams moved in, weaving through the devastation with careful precision, documenting every fragment, every mark, every unsettling detail that might hold answers. The fire was out. The scene had been secured. But for investigators, this was only the beginning. What had happened inside Marta Bednarczyk's home was not simply a tragic accident, it was something far more unsettling. Something that would unravel piece by piece, revealing details that no one was prepared to confront. The forensic teams moved through the remains of the house with careful precision. Each step, each collected sample, each charred fragment had the potential to offer answers. The post-mortem examination confirmed what responders already suspected. The fire hadn't been the cause of death. Marta had suffered multiple stab wounds. Deep. Intentional. Her injuries spoke to a violent struggle, to moments of pain that had preceded the fire, a fire that now appeared to be an attempt to erase evidence rather than an unfortunate accident. Authorities were faced with two critical questions. Who would do this? And why? As investigators pieced together their initial theories, their focus turned to those closest to the case, the individuals who had been near the home, connected to Marta's life, or who might have had a reason to be there that night. And that was when the unthinkable happened. A suspect emerged. Not an adult. Not someone known for a criminal past. A child. A 13-year-old girl, charged not only with murder, but with arson with intent to endanger life. Her identity, protected by law, meant she wouldn't be named publicly. But in a town that had already been shaken by the tragedy, the knowledge alone was enough to send shockwaves through the community. This wasn't the kind of crime people could make sense of. A child, a young girl, accused of ending a mother's life. It raised questions no one had answers to. How did this happen? What could have possibly led to this moment? The legal system moved quickly. The girl was arrested, charged, and brought before the court. Even in those early proceedings, the weight of the case was overwhelming, a trial unlike anything Wellingborough had seen before. And beyond the courtroom, the grief remained. Marta's family, shattered by the loss, struggled to find words. Friends, neighbors, loved ones, all left grasping at memories of a woman who had meant so much to them, yet was gone in a way no one could comprehend. Tributes poured in. Flowers at the site. Messages of love, of sorrow, of disbelief. She had been a mother, a sister, a friend. Someone whose life had been devoted to caring for others. And now, she had been taken in a way that left more questions than answers. The trial would bring details to light. The investigation would reveal what happened inside those walls. But nothing could bring Marta back. The reality of loss is never just in the moment, it lingers. It stays in the places where laughter used to be, in the silence that follows where a voice once filled a room. And for those who loved her, the hardest part was only just beginning. The trial was set. The evidence had been gathered. But the questions, the ones that had haunted investigators, the ones whispered behind closed doors, the ones that had left an entire community in disbelief, remained. No one could quite piece together the why. Forensic reports confirmed what was already known. Marta's injuries were brutal, a level of violence that seemed out of place, not something expected from a suspect so young. Had this been planned? Was there a motive buried beneath layers of events no one had yet uncovered? Or was this something else entirely, a tragic moment that spiraled far beyond control? As authorities combed through the details, possibilities emerged. The first theory was the one investigators always consider, the notion of a personal dispute that had escalated in a way no one anticipated. Had Marta known the suspect? Was this a crime with an underlying connection? Or was it random, one of those rare, incomprehensible acts that occur without reason? Law enforcement worked through possibilities. Any ties between Marta and the girl were scrutinized. They searched for past encounters, any sign of conflict, anything that could explain the level of rage that had unfolded that night. But there was little clarity. Which led to a second theory, psychological factors. Could a child, so young, be capable of this act without deep-rooted issues already present? Studies have shown that extreme violent behavior in juveniles often stems from a complex web of psychological and environmental influences. Was this an impulsive act? Did something trigger it, an argument, a fleeting moment that escalated beyond control? Or was there something darker at play? A mind that had already begun walking the line between control and chaos? Experts weighed in. Some argued that cases like this, though rare, weren't impossible, that certain factors could push even the youngest individuals toward acts society could never imagine them capable of. And yet, even with all the speculation, the facts remained painfully unclear. Beyond the psychological aspect lay another question: influence. In the modern world, where exposure to information, media, and external influences is nearly unfiltered, how much do these factors play a role? It's an unsettling question, one that has no easy answer. What effect does media, social structures, and access to knowledge beyond one's years have on young minds? Could someone so young have absorbed something, an idea, an image, a distorted perception of reality, that led to this moment? Or was this something far more isolated? An event that had nothing to do with outside influences and everything to do with the specific circumstances of that night? As these theories swirled, the community was left shattered. People struggled to make sense of what had happened. This was not the kind of tragedy Wellingborough was used to seeing. A mother of 3, gone. A child accused of murder. There was grief, but there was also fear. Fear of what this meant, fear of how such an event could occur, fear of whether anyone could truly understand the depth of it. And as time passed, the unanswered questions remained. Because no theory, not psychology, not influence, not speculation, could bring Marta back. And that was the reality everyone had to face. The investigation had moved swiftly. The evidence had been gathered. Now, the case would shift from the crime scene to the courtroom, a place where facts would be scrutinized, where arguments would be made, and where the difficult process of justice would unfold. But this was not a typical trial. The suspect, just 13 years old, was now facing the legal system in a way few minors ever do. Following her arrest, the girl was brought before the court. The early hearings were procedural, brief, formal, necessary steps in setting the framework for what was to come. She appeared before Northampton Magistrates' Court, where her charges were formally outlined: murder and arson with intent to endanger life. Because of her age, extra measures were taken: protections, legal considerations, careful handling of the case. But even with these factors in place, the gravity of the situation remained. Few minors are charged with crimes of this scale. And fewer still are placed before a judge, facing the possibility of a trial that could define their future. From the magistrate's court, her case was sent to Northampton Crown Court, a step that marked the transition from preliminary hearings to a formal legal process. A provisional trial date was set, a marker in time where arguments would be made, where witness accounts and forensic evidence would be presented, and where the full story of what happened that night would be dissected in legal terms. But trying a child, especially for a crime as severe as this, comes with challenges that few cases present. The justice system, designed to consider the complexities of juvenile cases, had to navigate a delicate balance, holding the defendant accountable while understanding the implications of prosecuting someone so young. There were legal protections in place, measures to ensure fairness, to prevent undue pressure, to safeguard the rights of a minor on trial. Yet, at the heart of the case, one truth remained unchanged. A mother had lost her life. And now, a child's fate would be decided in a courtroom. For Marta's loved ones, the legal process was necessary, but painful. Every hearing, every update, every step forward was a reminder of what had been lost. Her family stood by, waiting for answers, waiting for justice, waiting for the legal system to complete the process that had begun on that tragic night. For them, the courtroom was not just a place of legal discussions, it was the final chapter in a story they never wanted to be part of. A chapter that could not change the past, only define the future. The trial would come. The details of that night would be laid bare. But even with all the legal proceedings, the lingering question, the one that had never quite found an answer, would remain. Why? And would the courtroom provide what the family, the investigators, and the community had all been searching for? Resolution? Or simply closure without understanding? Only time would tell. The trial would eventually end. The legal system would do what it was designed to do, assess the evidence, weigh the arguments, and render a verdict. But for Marta's family, for the people who had known her not as a name in a case but as a mother, a sister, a friend, the law could only do so much. Because justice, in its most formal sense, does not erase loss. It does not bring back the moments stolen. And it does not fill the silence left behind. For Marta's loved ones, the days following her death were not about courtroom procedures. They were about learning how to exist without her. About waking up and remembering. About standing in places where her presence once filled the room. And realizing she would never be there again. The grieving process is complex, it does not follow a straight path, and it does not adhere to timelines. Some days feel unbearable. Others bring flickers of peace, but only for a moment. And through it all, the unanswered questions linger. There is no way to make sense of something like this. Only ways to move forward despite it. Beyond the walls of Marta's home, Wellingborough struggled with its own emotions. A town that had never seen a crime quite like this was suddenly forced to reconcile with an event that felt impossible. A mother gone. A child accused. It was unsettling not just because of its nature, but because it challenged every assumption people had about safety, about age, about what could or couldn't happen. There was fear. There was anger. But there was also reflection, the need to understand, rather than simply react. Because in the wake of tragedy, there is always a choice. A choice between outrage and empathy. Between closing off and listening. No one could undo what had happened. No verdict, no explanation, no theory could bring Marta back to the people who loved her. But what remained, what always remains after tragedy, is the opportunity to learn. To support those who grieve. To examine the deeper factors that lead to such unthinkable moments. To recognize that behind headlines, behind cases, behind statistics, there are human lives. Lives with histories, with families, with moments of joy before the pain arrived. And if there is one takeaway from all of this, it is that tragedy should never be reduced to a passing thought, it should be remembered as a life that mattered. For Marta. For her children. For those left behind. And for the understanding that, even in darkness, empathy must never be lost. Story 2. This is the case of Nicholas, dad accused of kicking daughter, then waiting 5 hours to call 911 while girl died. There are stories that slip through the cracks. They don't make the headlines for long. They don't spark outrage on a massive scale. They don't lead to sweeping reforms. Yet, if you listen closely, they carry weight, far heavier than words alone can bear. These are the stories of lives lost, questions unanswered, and justice left in uncertainty. This is one of those stories. A child, innocent and full of life. A father, entrusted with her care. And a series of choices that, one by one, led to an irreversible end. No alarms were raised. No immediate calls for help. Just time, long stretches of time where something could have been done, but wasn't. And when action finally came, it was too late. Cases like this aren't merely about what happened. They're just as much about what should have happened, but didn't. The warning signs that went unnoticed. The hesitation that cost a life. The moments where intervention was possible, yet for reasons we may never fully understand, remained absent. As we walk through the details, there will be no dramatics. No exaggerations. Just the facts. Because sometimes, the simplest truths are the hardest to accept. This story, like so many others, begins quietly. A home. A family. A life that should have stretched far beyond its short years. But beneath the surface, something wasn't right. And when the truth emerged, it left behind only grief, unanswered questions, and the eerie silence of what cannot be undone. We begin in a place so ordinary, so unremarkable, that nothing about it would suggest tragedy. A father and his daughter, living their lives, as any family would. There were no alarms, no obvious warnings, just a routine that carried on, day after day. But the question that lingers long after the case files are closed is this: how does a tragedy like this unfold unnoticed? Before everything unraveled, before the headlines, before the grief that stretched far beyond just one family, there was simply a little girl. Isabella Loving. A name barely known to most, but a life filled with all the small moments that make childhood sacred. Those quiet, everyday joys. Those tiny pieces of existence that, when woven together, create something whole. She was 6 years old. A child who carried the kind of energy that fills a room without effort. The kind that makes adults pause for a second, remembering their own younger years, a time when the world felt endless. She loved to play, as all children do. Loved to laugh, loved the simplest things, a favorite toy, a sunny afternoon, the comfort of familiarity. Her world was small, as most children's worlds are. Centered around home, school, the people she saw every day. But in that smallness, there was wonder. Because at 6 years old, even the most ordinary things can feel extraordinary. She lived in Wichita, Kansas. A city of steady rhythms, of neighborhoods filled with routine. The kind of place where people know each other, at least in passing. Where familiarity exists, even if connection sometimes does not. She was not alone in this world. She had a father. A mother, too, Andrea, though she had family, a structure around her, imperfect but present. And within that structure, there were moments. Some good, some difficult. Some that, looking back, might have carried the weight of something more. But at the time, they were just fragments of life. Pieces that didn't yet form a whole picture. For Isabella, the days passed as they do for any child. School. Play. Conversations too simple to hold meaning to anyone but her. She existed in a world where bedtime stories should have been a given, where safety should have been unquestionable, where the people meant to protect her should have never hesitated. And yet, the reality of her life was not as straightforward as it seemed from the outside. Beneath the surface, behind the doors of home, there were details that later carried significance. Details that, in hindsight, painted a different picture. But at the time, they were just part of everyday life, quiet, unspoken, unnoticed by those who might have been able to intervene. This is where the story begins, not with the tragedy, not with the aftermath, but with a little girl who deserved more than what the world gave her. At 6:50 a.m. on April 3, Washoe County Sheriff's Office deputies were called to the family's home about a report of an unresponsive child, according to the statement from the sheriff's office. The child was pronounced dead by emergency responders when they arrived on the scene. According to the probable cause affidavit, Isabella was found in an upstairs bedroom lying next to a tiny mattress with no bed frame. Isabella showed many signs of trauma on her face, hips, pelvis, arms and genitals, and had 10 injuries on her face including a black eye and a gash over her eye, the affidavit alleges. Isabella had been coughing up blood and mucus for 10 days before she died. On her last night alive, Nicholas took Isabella's temperature, which he said was 96 or 97 degrees, gave her a bath before putting her to bed in a 5 by 5 foot box with a lock on it, the affidavit alleges. Nicholas admitted that they would sometimes keep Isabella in a small, makeshift cubby in the girl's room, sometimes as punishment, the affidavit alleges. The affidavit states the couple's other 2 daughters slept in a nice, queen-sized bed. At about midnight, one of the couple's other 2 daughters woke up the parents saying Isabella was throwing up. At about 2 a.m., she stopped breathing, but her parents allegedly waited to call 911, according to the affidavit. Andrea allegedly told detectives Nicholas wouldn't let her call 911. She said he wanted to bury the little girl's body in their backyard and then run to his parents' house in Virginia. Nicholas allegedly blamed Andrea for not calling 911 at 2 a.m., according to the affidavit. Ultimately, they decided to remove Isabella from the cubby, drag her and her bed across the room and stage it there, go with the story of them finding her at around 7 a.m. They came up with explanations of her injuries, being that she fell multiple times or was hit with toys. Nicholas said Isabella had injured herself, sometimes by falling, and that one of the other children had hit her with a plastic bat, the affidavit alleges. But Andrea told detectives she recently saw Nicholas kick Isabella in the genitals. The moment Isabella Loving was pronounced dead, a new timeline began. A timeline marked not by the moments she lived, but by the questions that followed. The ones that demanded answers. The ones that could not be ignored. Authorities didn't have the luxury of hesitation. A child had died under circumstances that raised immediate alarms. And though there were claims, statements given, none of them explained the most pressing question of all: why had no one called for help sooner? In the days following her death, police launched their investigation. What they found was not just evidence, but gaps. Long stretches of time where action could have been taken, but wasn't. Reports soon revealed a troubling detail: Isabella's father, the man responsible for her care, had waited 5 hours before reaching out for emergency assistance. 5 hours. Not minutes. Hours. Forensic teams combed through the scene, reconstructing the timeline. They documented injuries. They gathered accounts. And the picture that began to form was not one of an accident, not one of a simple misstep, but of choices. Choices made, choices ignored, choices that ultimately resulted in a life lost far too soon. Authorities wasted little time. The day after Isabella had been declared deceased, her father was arrested. Charged with first-degree murder and child abuse. Legal proceedings began swiftly, with prosecutors focusing on one critical element: negligence. Not just in the immediate moments of Isabella's injuries, but in the long hours that followed. The decision to wait. The failure to intervene. The absence of urgency where it mattered most. The courtroom became a battleground, not just for justice, but for understanding. What happened that day? Could Isabella have been saved? And perhaps most haunting of all, was this preventable? This wasn't just a single case. It was a reflection of something larger. Something systemic. Because the truth was, Isabella had not lived in complete isolation. She had been part of a system, a world that was supposed to protect children like her. A world that, in too many cases, failed. Cases like Isabella's are not new. They are not rare. They exist in legal files, in reports written with careful language, in the stories of children whose voices were never heard. And each time, the same questions surface: how did this happen? And how do we stop it from happening again? Child protective services exist for a reason. Laws, policies, guidelines, designed to prevent tragedies like this. But still, some children slip through the cracks. Some warnings go unnoticed. Some moments of intervention never arrive. Isabella Loving should have been seen. Should have been protected. Should have lived. When the court proceedings began, there was no undoing what had already happened. No words, no sentences, no verdicts could change the fact that a child was gone. Isabella Loving's name had entered the legal system, her story threaded into case files, her life distilled into reports and testimony. The law moved forward. Charges were laid. Witnesses stepped forward. But even in the pursuit of justice, something always lingered: the undeniable truth that justice, in cases like this, is never complete. It cannot restore. It cannot rewrite time. It can only serve as a consequence, an afterthought to a tragedy already set in motion. Her father, accused of waiting 5 hours before calling for help, stood trial. First-degree murder. Child abuse. The charges weighed heavily, and yet, even with the legal system pressing for accountability, the question remained: could this have been prevented? Because cases like Isabella's don't begin at the moment of tragedy. They start much earlier, in overlooked signs, in moments that should have raised concerns but never did. In warnings that, had they been acknowledged, might have changed everything. That's where reflection begins, not in punishment, but in prevention. In asking the harder questions. In looking at the systems meant to protect children and confronting where they fall short. Child welfare services exist to intervene. Laws are designed to protect. But these systems only work when vigilance is constant, when communities step forward, when the people closest to these cases, neighbors, teachers, caregivers, notice the signs before it is too late. Isabella should have been seen. Not just in the aftermath, not just in headlines, not just in courtrooms. She should have been seen when it mattered most. And for those still out there, children in homes where safety is uncertain, that vigilance, that responsibility, is critical. This case is a reminder, but not just of tragedy. Of awareness. Of action. Of the choices people can make to protect the vulnerable. Because while nothing can change what happened to Isabella Loving, the future is unwritten. And every story, every life, is shaped by the moments before crisis strikes. So what happens next? That answer isn't found in case files or legal proceedings. It's found in conversations. In education. In every moment where someone chooses to notice, to step forward, to prevent another name from becoming just another statistic. Story 3. This is the story of a 5-year-old boy who was confirmed dead after drinking apple juice with meth in it, and mom faces murder charge. A young boy, just 5 years old, reaches for a drink, something simple, something familiar, apple juice. A small gesture, so innocent, so routine, that no one gives it a second thought. But within moments, everything begins to change. His body reacts. His breathing shifts. Confusion sets in. His world, once predictable and safe, is suddenly slipping beyond reach. The adults around him hesitate. Seconds stretch into minutes. And in those minutes, uncertainty hangs in the air, thick, unspoken. The questions would come later. The investigations, the accusations, the search for answers. But in that moment, there was only one undeniable truth: something was terribly, terribly wrong. How could something as familiar as a simple drink become the catalyst for tragedy? This is the story of an afternoon that should have been unremarkable, an innocent act that should have carried no consequence. But instead, it became a turning point, one that would end in unimaginable loss and a search for justice that would shake an entire community. Before the events of that day, before the tragedy that would ripple across news headlines and courtroom floors, there was just a mother and her son, existing in their own little world, navigating the everyday rhythm of life. Heather Opsinks was no stranger to struggle. Like so many mothers raising young children, she had seen her fair share of sleepless nights, hurried mornings, and the endless tide of responsibilities that never seemed to slow. Raising a child was demanding, but it was also her greatest joy. Her son, just 5 years old, was full of boundless energy, the kind only children possess. He found wonder in the smallest things: the color of the sky, the shape of the clouds, the way his fingers left smudges on the screen when tracing cartoons with eager fascination. He was learning, absorbing, growing, completely unaware of the chaos that could exist beyond the walls of his home. For him, the world was simple. He had routines. Favorite toys, favorite foods. He had laughter that could brighten even the most tiresome days. And he had a mother who, despite life's difficulties, did her best to provide. There were times, of course, when things weren't easy. Bills that loomed, decisions that weighed heavy, uncertainties that whispered in the quiet moments. But no one, least of all Heather, could have predicted that an ordinary afternoon would change everything. The city of Riviera Beach, Florida is known for its coastal charm, its steady ocean breeze, its golden stretches of sand, its streets lined with palm trees swaying ever so gently against the sky. To outsiders, it's picturesque, an idyllic slice of Florida's sunshine and warmth. But beneath its postcard-like beauty, Riviera Beach, like any city, carried its own unspoken realities. The kind you don't see in travel brochures. The kind only those who live there understand. It was here, in an unremarkable apartment tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, that Heather and her son lived their lives. No grand home, no sprawling backyard. Just a space, small, familiar, lived in. The kind of place that held the echoes of everyday life, the television humming softly in the background, the clatter of dishes, the shuffle of footsteps moving from room to room. That afternoon, nothing seemed out of place. The air was thick with heat, the kind that made the indoors feel like a refuge. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car rolled slowly down the street. Inside their home, the boy reached for his juice, a simple action, a moment no different from hundreds before it. But unknown to him, unknown to his mother, unknown to anyone in that room, this moment would be different. Danger doesn't always arrive with warning signs. It doesn't always announce itself with flashing lights or the unmistakable sound of urgency. Sometimes, it slips in unnoticed, woven into the fabric of the ordinary, hiding within the routine. In the next few minutes, decisions would be made. Words would be exchanged. Actions would unfold. And somewhere in the midst of it all, a fatal mistake would be made, one that would shift the course of everything that followed. It happened quickly. Too quickly for anyone to process in real time. A bottle. A sip. The faint rustling of the plastic as the liquid poured out. The sound was familiar, nothing unusual. A child reaching for his drink, a routine act, something done without thought, just muscle memory, habit. The babysitter was there, watching. Not hovering, not concerned, just present. They had been watching him for the afternoon, keeping an eye on things while his mother stepped away. Nothing had seemed off. The child had been fine, his laughter bouncing off the walls earlier in the day, his little feet tapping against the floor as he moved from room to room. And then, he took that sip. A small gulp. A fraction of a second. And everything shifted. It wasn't immediate, not at first. But something in his expression flickered. A change, subtle, quiet. The way his brows tightened, just slightly, as if trying to understand what his body was telling him. The hesitation in his breath. The babysitter noticed. Not alarmed, just aware. Something had altered. His body had stiffened for just a moment, then loosened again, like a passing wave that didn't fully settle. Then came the cough. Light, scratchy, uncertain. A sound that should have meant nothing, but carried everything. The second stretched. He looked around, confused, small hands gripping the edges of the table as though trying to steady himself against something he didn't yet comprehend. His eyes searched the room, not panicked, not desperate, just searching. The babysitter called his name. He didn't answer right away. And then, the breath. Short, clipped. His little chest rose, uneven. His fingers clenched and released, uncertain. Something was happening. Something was wrong. The moment passed too quickly, and yet not quickly enough. The babysitter hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. It wasn't dramatic, not yet. The boy wasn't crying, wasn't screaming. He was just, changing. His movements slowed, his breathing shallowed. His eyes blinked too deliberately, as though trying to focus in a room that had suddenly grown too bright, too loud, too distant. Then came the dizziness. The sway in his small frame. His hands reached instinctively, grasping for balance, for something steady, something real. And that was the moment when hesitation transformed into fear. The babysitter called out again, voice sharper now. Concern creeping in. Are you okay? No answer. Another cough. Then another. Then the gasping, the shallow inhale, the faltering exhale. It wasn't normal. It wasn't right. Panic. Movement. The babysitter reached for the phone, fumbling, pressing buttons, dialing. The number was obvious, always there, burned into memory. 911, Emergency Services. Help. The voice on the other end, steady, practiced, asking questions, giving instructions. The minutes blurred. The babysitter spoke, words jumbling slightly, explaining, trying to piece together what had just happened. A child. 5 years old. Breathing strangely. Unsteady. Drank something. Apple juice. The dispatcher's tone shifted, sharp, professional. Questions became commands. Keep the child awake. Monitor breathing. But the babysitter could already see it, the way his little body sagged, heavier now, as though exhaustion was pulling him under. Something was happening. Something irreversible. The ambulance arrived fast, but not fast enough. The boy was rushed inside, placed on a stretcher, medical professionals working quickly, efficiently. Words were exchanged, details handed over. Symptoms listed. Timeline assessed. He was barely conscious now, his small frame lost beneath the sterile brightness of hospital lights, the the steady beeping of machines monitoring his failing body. The tests came next. The toxicology screen. The examination. The search for answers. And then, the result. Methamphetamine. Found in his system, coursing through him, breaking down his body in ways no child should ever endure. A stunned silence. A shift in the air. The nurses exchanged looks. The doctors conferred. There was no misunderstanding. No misinterpretation. Methamphetamine. In his apple juice. The hospital room was quiet now. Machines hummed, monitors blinked, and a child lay still beneath the fluorescent glow, his small body battling something far beyond his understanding. But outside those walls, the investigation had begun. The doctors had flagged the toxicology report immediately. The result wasn't vague, wasn't open to interpretation. Methamphetamine. A substance so potent, so dangerous, that its presence in a 5-year-old system raised immediate alarms. The call to authorities came swiftly. Questions were fired, details demanded. How had this happened? Where had the drug come from? Was there foul play? Within hours, officers arrived at the home, the same space where an innocent child had played, where laughter had once echoed through the walls, where, just earlier that afternoon, a simple bottle of juice had become the catalyst for devastation. They moved through the apartment with precision, scanning, searching, analyzing. Nothing was left untouched, cabinets pulled open, drawers inspected, every inch of the living space carefully dissected in search of answers. And then, they found it. Traces residue. Evidence. Methamphetamine. Hidden. Tucked away. Present in places where no child should ever have been exposed. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mystery. It was in the home. It had been there all along. What had been suspected was now undeniable. This wasn't a case of outside contamination, of a stranger's mistake, of an unintentional exposure. The drug had come from within. From somewhere close. From someone close. And that meant, someone was responsible. The next part happened swiftly, in a way that felt almost unreal. A moment where reality collides with consequence, where the pieces fall into place and the weight of responsibility becomes impossible to ignore. Heather Opsinks, the boy's mother, was arrested. There was no hesitation, no delay. The evidence spoke louder than words, louder than denials, louder than explanations. Officers moved in, handcuffs snapped shut. The room fell silent as reality settled in. A child, barely old enough to understand the world around him, lay in a hospital bed fighting for his life. And his mother, the person meant to protect him, to shield him from harm, was now facing charges that would define everything that came next. Murder. The word carried weight, finality. It wasn't something that could be reasoned away, softened, dismissed. There was no room for doubt. No space for questioning intent. The facts stood unshaken. Methamphetamine had entered his body. Through the simplest act. Through something familiar. Through something that should have been safe. Through apple juice. Her first appearance in court was inevitable. The news had spread, whispers turning into headlines, shock turning into outrage. She stood before the judge, the weight of the charges heavy upon her shoulders, her expression unreadable. The courtroom was filled with the quiet murmurs of legal proceedings, lawyers speaking in low tones, officials moving through practiced motions, the scent of paper and polished wood hanging in the air. The bond hearing was brief, Procedural. The prosecution laid out their case. The defense countered, offering justifications, explanations, arguments. But the facts remained. A child had died. The weight of that truth overshadowed everything else. She was held without bond, pending further trial. The case would move forward, the evidence would be presented, the testimonies would unfold. But nothing, could change what had already happened. The story had already been written. And now, justice waited. When tragedies like this occur, there is always one lingering question, the one that refuses to fade, the one that echoes through courtrooms, conversations, and news reports alike. How did this happen? To fully grasp the implications, experts often turn to psychology, to the complex interplay between addiction, environment, and neglect. Dr. Alan Bennett, a forensic psychologist specializing in cases involving parental substance abuse, explains. People often assume that harm to a child occurs through deliberate malice, but in many cases, it's a result of something far more insidious, neglect that stems from addiction. Addiction doesn't just affect the person using, it permeates the household, the relationships, the stability that a child depends on. And when drugs enter that environment, the risk factor skyrockets. His words cut through any lingering doubt. This was not a simple oversight. This was an environment that had already been compromised. Criminologist Lisa Chandler sheds light on another key aspect: why cases involving young children evoke such strong reactions from the public. When an adult dies due to substance abuse, there's often an element of personal responsibility attached to the conversation. But when it's a child, especially one this young, the response is different. A child has no agency in that situation. They trust the world around them to keep them safe, and when that trust is broken, it leaves a lasting mark not just on the family, but on society itself. The implications are devastating. A child who should have been shielded from harm instead became its victim. And the worst part? It could have been prevented. Riviera Beach was no stranger to challenges, but this was different. The news spread fast. Headlines blared the details. Television anchors recounted the tragic series of events in hushed tones, their expressions tight, measured. The community's response was immediate: grief, anger, disbelief. At candlelight vigils, residents gathered, murmuring among themselves, shaking their heads, exchanging fragments of outrage and sorrow. How does something like this happen? Why was that drug even in the house? That little boy didn't deserve this. The emotions weren't just sadness, they carried frustration, a deep-seated exhaustion with a cycle that felt all too familiar. Children lost to neglect. Families shattered by addiction. The media echoed the same sentiments. Journalists pressed officials for answers, commentators dissected every detail of the case, social workers warned of the warning signs often overlooked in troubled households. And through it all, one lingering question remained. Was this preventable? The answer was painful. Yes. In the days following the tragedy, the conversation shifted from mourning to prevention. The story was heartbreaking. But now, it was about what could be done to ensure it never happened again. Experts pointed to the alarming rise of substance abuse cases involving parents and guardians, cases where addiction created environments unsafe for children, where oversight failed, where intervention came too late. Nationwide, officials renewed discussions on policies surrounding child protection in households affected by drug use. Advocacy groups stepped forward, calling for stricter regulations, better support systems for parents battling addiction, more accessible rehabilitation programs, and stronger safeguards for children living in these environments. The tragedy was undeniable. But what came next, how society responded, how change was demanded, would determine whether this story remained just another statistic, or whether it became a catalyst for change. Stories like this linger. Not because they are sensational, not because they spark curiosity, but because they uncover something far deeper. Something unsettling. Something that should force all of us to stop and ask, how many times have we overlooked the signs? A child trusted the world around him. Trusted his mother. Trusted the environment that was supposed to protect him. And yet, that trust wasn't enough. This isn't just one story. It's not just one case. It's part of a larger conversation, about responsibility, about addiction, about neglect. It forces us to look beyond the headlines. Beyond the courtroom. Beyond the moment when handcuffs snapped shut. It forces us to ask if we are doing enough. Enough to protect the vulnerable. Enough to ensure that children never have to bear the consequences of an adult's choices. Because this should never have happened. And yet, it did. These are the stories that demand reflection. That ask for discussion. That push us to seek understanding, to question, to challenge the systems that allow tragedies like this to unfold. Story 4. This is the tragic case of Adrienne Robert, a graphic designer originally from Maine, who was found dead in her bathroom with a single stab to her chest. In the quiet pre-dawn hours of July 14, 2012, a harrowing 911 call shattered the stillness of Clearwater, Florida. The voice on the line, trembling and urgent, belonged to Jay Lafew, who had just discovered his roommate, 29-year-old Adrienne Robert, lifeless in their shared apartment. Adrienne, a vibrant graphic designer originally from Maine, had been preparing for a fresh start, planning to move out the very next day. The night before, she and Jay had ventured to Diamond Dolls, a local nightclub, to celebrate this new chapter. Unbeknownst to them, this innocent outing would culminate in a tragedy that would haunt the community. Surveillance footage from the club later revealed Adrienne leaving alone around 1:30 a.m., a black shawl draped over her shoulders. A man, previously seen interacting with her inside, handed her the shawl she had forgotten and then walked alongside her into the night. This seemingly benign gesture would later become a focal point in the investigation. Upon returning home around 3:30 a.m., Jay stumbled upon a scene of horror. Adrienne's lifeless body lay in the bathroom, a single stab wound to her chest. The apartment bore signs of a violent struggle, overturned furniture, scattered belongings, all indicators of the terror that had unfolded just hours before. The Clearwater community, known for its serene beaches and tight-knit neighborhoods, was thrust into a state of shock and fear. Who could commit such a heinous act? And, more disturbingly, was the perpetrator still lurking among them? As detectives delved deeper into the case, they faced mounting pressure to unravel the mystery and bring justice for Adrienne. Through meticulous investigative work, authorities identified the man seen with Adrienne that fateful night as 23-year-old Thomas Hampton Frederick. Frederick, a transient with no fixed address, had no prior criminal record, making the motive behind this brutal crime even more perplexing. Detectives employed both traditional surveillance techniques and modern forensic methods to build their case. A discarded cigarette butt, carelessly left by Frederick, provided the DNA evidence linking him to the crime scene. The arrest of Frederick brought a semblance of relief to the community, but it also unearthed deeper questions about the nature of violence and the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath everyday interactions. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom became a battleground of emotions, with Adrienne's family seeking justice and closure for their beloved daughter. In February 2014, after a grueling legal process, Frederick was found guilty of first-degree murder and grand theft auto, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. While this verdict provided a measure of justice, the void left by Adrienne's untimely death remained a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the unforeseen perils that can alter it in an instant. This case serves as a somber testament to the importance of community vigilance and the relentless pursuit of justice in the face of senseless violence. Adrienne's legacy endures, inspiring efforts to ensure that such tragedies are prevented in the future, and that the memories of those lost are honored through unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Clearwater, Florida, a city renowned for its sun-drenched beaches, vibrant art scene, and a community that epitomizes the quintessential Floridian lifestyle. Nestled along the Gulf Coast, Clearwater boasts a population of approximately 117,000 residents, with a median age of 46, reflecting a blend of youthful energy and seasoned wisdom. The city's demographic tapestry is rich and varied. The story of Adrienne Robert all began in the coastal city of Clearwater, Florida, a place renowned for its sun-drenched beaches, vibrant art scene, and a community that embodies the quintessential Floridian lifestyle. Nestled along the Gulf Coast, Clearwater is home to approximately 117,000 residents, with a median age of 46, reflecting a blend of youthful energy and seasoned wisdom. Its diverse population and lively atmosphere make it an inviting destination, but beneath its picturesque facade, an unthinkable tragedy would soon unfold. Amidst this picturesque setting, the nightlife of Clearwater adds a dynamic pulse to the city's rhythm. One notable establishment is Diamond Dolls, a gentleman's club strategically located at 16361 U.S. Highway 19 North. Established in late 1989, Diamond Dolls quickly cemented its reputation, being voted the #1 topless club in Tampa Bay for 17 consecutive years. A significant remodel in 2015 revitalized its ambience, ensuring it remained a premier destination for both locals and visitors seeking evening entertainment. Within this vibrant community resided Adrienne Robert, a 29-year-old graphic designer originally from Maine. Adrienne relocated to Florida in 2007, drawn by the state's burgeoning creative industry and the promise of new beginnings. Known for her vivacious spirit and artistic flair, she quickly became an integral part of Clearwater's creative community. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrienne and her roommate, Jay Lafew, decided to commemorate her upcoming move with a night out at Diamond Dolls. The club, renowned for its lively atmosphere and entertainment, seemed the perfect venue for a farewell celebration. Unbeknownst to them, this night would set in motion a series of events that would forever alter their lives and cast a shadow over the Clearwater community. As the night progressed, Adrienne and Jay immersed themselves in the club's vibrant ambience, mingling with other patrons and enjoying the performances. The celebratory mood was palpable, with laughter and music filling the air. However, as the clock inched closer to closing time, the night's trajectory took an unforeseen turn. Adrienne Robert was last seen around 1:30 a.m., leaving the Diamond Dolls nightclub. Surveillance footage captured her retrieving a forgotten black shawl, handed to her by an unidentified man. The two were seen walking together, their figures fading into the dimly lit streets, marking the last public sighting of Adrienne alive. Approximately 2 hours later, at 3:30 a.m., Adrienne's roommate, Jay Lafew, returned to their shared apartment. Expecting the familiar comfort of home, Jay was instead met with an unsettling silence. As he called out to Adrienne with no response, a sense of dread began to seep in. Venturing further into the apartment, he discovered a scene that would forever haunt him. In the bathroom, Jay found Adrienne's lifeless body. She had suffered a fatal stab wound to her chest, a brutal act that had extinguished a bright and promising life. Overcome with shock and grief, Jay immediately contacted emergency services, his voice trembling as he relayed the horrific discovery. The crime scene bore the unmistakable signs of a violent struggle. Furniture lay overturned, personal items scattered across the floor, and traces of blood marked the path of the altercation. These chaotic remnants painted a harrowing picture of Adrienne's final moments, reflecting her desperate fight against the assailant. As dawn broke over Clearwater, the news of Adrienne's tragic death began to spread, casting a shadow over the community. Friends and neighbors grappled with a mix of sorrow and fear, struggling to comprehend how such a heinous act could occur in their midst. The once lively apartment now stood as a somber reminder of a life abruptly and violently cut short. After a short time, Clearwater detectives arrived at the apartment complex where Adrienne Robert had been found murdered. The scene was chaotic, with signs of a violent struggle evident throughout the apartment. Furniture was overturned, and personal belongings were scattered, indicating a desperate fight had taken place. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, leading investigators to consider the possibility that Adrienne may have known her attacker. The medical examiner's report revealed that Adrienne had suffered a single, fatal stab wound to her chest. This precise injury raised questions about the nature of the attack. Was it a targeted assault, or had something escalated unexpectedly? Additionally, evidence of sexual assault was documented, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Site-turn-zero search for. Forensic teams meticulously combed the apartment for evidence, collecting various samples, including potential DNA evidence from the victim and surrounding areas. However, initial database searches yielded no immediate matches, leaving investigators without a clear suspect. Detectives turned their attention to surveillance footage from the Diamond Dolls nightclub, where Adrienne had spent her final evening. The footage revealed Adrienne interacting with a man who handed her a black shawl she had left behind. The two were seen leaving the club together around 1:30 a.m., providing a crucial lead in the investigation. Using this footage, investigators identified the man as 23-year-old Thomas Hampton Frederick, a local resident with no significant criminal history. Surveillance also captured Frederick's vehicle, which matched the description of a car seen near Adrienne's apartment complex around the time of the murder. With this information, detectives began covert surveillance of Frederick, monitoring his daily activities in hopes of obtaining further evidence. They observed him frequenting local establishments, interacting with acquaintances, and maintaining his routine, all while remaining unaware of the scrutiny he was under. The breakthrough came when Frederick discarded a cigarette butt outside a local convenience store. Recognizing the opportunity, detectives swiftly retrieved the cigarette and submitted it for DNA analysis. The results were conclusive. The DNA from the cigarette matched the DNA evidence collected from Adrienne's apartment, definitively linking Frederick to the crime scene. Armed with this critical evidence, authorities moved quickly to apprehend Frederick. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and grand theft auto, as he had also stolen Adrienne's car following the murder. During questioning, Frederick made certain admissions, though specific details were not disclosed by investigators. The arrest brought a semblance of relief to the Clearwater community, which had been on edge following the brutal crime. Vigils were held in Adrienne's memory, and residents expressed gratitude for the swift action of law enforcement in bringing her alleged killer to justice. The case underscored the critical role of forensic science and diligent police work in solving violent crimes. Following his arrest, Frederick was charged with first-degree murder and grand theft auto. The trial commenced in late January 2014, drawing significant attention due to the nature of the crime and the community's interest. Over the course of 3 days, the prosecution presented compelling evidence, including the DNA match from the crime scene and Frederick's subsequent actions. The defense faced challenges in countering the forensic evidence and the narrative constructed by the prosecution. After deliberations, the jury returned a guilty verdict on January 31, 2014. Frederick was convicted of first-degree murder, a decision that brought a sense of justice to Adrienne's family and friends. The conviction ensured that Frederick would face a life sentence without the possibility of parole, reflecting the severity of his actions. Adrienne's family expressed profound relief and gratitude following the verdict. Her father, Mark Robert, poignantly remarked, "The animal that took my daughter is now going to be in a cage like an animal should be," underscoring the family's anguish and the trial's emotional weight. The case also served as a somber reminder of the potential dangers that can lurk unexpectedly, prompting many in the community to reflect on safety and the fragility of life. In the years following the conviction of Thomas Hampton Frederick for the murder of Adrienne Robert, the case seemed resolved. However, recent developments have unveiled new layers to this tragic story, prompting both reflection and renewed scrutiny. During the initial investigation and subsequent trial, Frederick maintained a narrative that positioned him as a passive participant in the events leading up to Adrienne's death. He claimed that their encounter was consensual and that he had no involvement in her murder. However, recent analyses of his statements have highlighted discrepancies. For instance, Frederick's timeline of events conflicted with surveillance footage and witness testimonies. While he stated he left Adrienne's residence shortly after their arrival, digital evidence from cell tower ping suggests he remained in the vicinity for a more extended period. Such inconsistencies have raised questions about the veracity of his account and his actual involvement in the crime. At the time of the investigation, certain details were withheld from the public to preserve the integrity of the case. Recently declassified documents reveal that a neighbor reported hearing raised voices and a loud thud around 2:45 a.m., contradicting Frederick's claim of a peaceful departure. Additionally, forensic analysis uncovered partial fingerprints on the bathroom sink, suggesting a possible struggle. These revelations paint a more chaotic scene than previously understood, indicating that Adrienne may have fought for her life in her final moments. Forensic psychologists have revisited Frederick's behavioral patterns, seeking to understand his mindset leading up to the crime. Dr. Emily Harper, a criminal psychologist, noted that individuals who commit such crimes often exhibit signs of escalating behavior, such as increased aggression or boundary violations. However, Frederick's lack of a prior criminal record presents an anomaly. Dr. Harper suggests that this could indicate suppressed violent tendencies or a triggering event that led to the crime, emphasizing the complexity of human behavior and the challenges in predicting such actions. The tragic murder of Adrienne Robert in July 2012 sent shockwaves through both the Clearwater, Florida community and her hometown in Maine. The senseless loss of a vibrant 29-year-old woman left an indelible mark on all who knew her. In the immediate aftermath, Clearwater residents were gripped by fear and sorrow. Vigils were held to honor Adrienne's memory, with community members coming together to support her family and friends. Local organizations emphasized the importance of community safety and solidarity during such trying times. Adrienne's loved ones have been steadfast in ensuring her legacy endures. Memorial services celebrated her life, highlighting her passions and the joy she brought to others. Friends and family have shared stories and memories, painting a picture of a compassionate and spirited individual. Online memorials, such as her obituary on Dignity Memorial, serve as lasting tributes to her life and the impact she had on those around her. As we reflect on this tragedy, one question lingers: was this truly a random attack, or is there more beneath the surface? The circumstances surrounding Adrienne's death continue to prompt discussions about safety, trust, and the unforeseen dangers that can lurk in everyday encounters. Story 5. Man accused of stabbing 18-year-old to death after coming home and finding him in bed with his wife. Jonathan Belk was a 41-year-old man known for his dedication to his work and his family. Friends and neighbors described him as a hard-working individual who kept to himself but was always willing to lend a hand when needed. He had been married to Jada Golston, 31, for several years. Their relationship, though private, appeared stable to those around them. Jada, 10 years Jonathan's junior, was known for her vibrant personality. She had a wide circle of friends and was often seen participating in community events. Despite the age difference, their marriage seemed harmonious, with Jada bringing a lively energy to Jonathan's more reserved demeanor. Enter Billie Jean Floyd, affectionately known as Lil Bill, to his friends and family. At 18, Billy had just celebrated his birthday 3 days prior to the incident. He was a local youth who enjoyed hunting, fishing, and working on four-wheelers. Described as a young man with a zest for life, Billy was known for his mechanical skills and his love for the outdoors. He spent much of his time with family and friends, embracing the simple pleasures of rural life. The connection between Jada and Billy was not widely known. Speculations arose about the nature of their relationship, but concrete details remained scarce. Some believed they had formed a close friendship, while others suspected a deeper, more intimate connection. Regardless, their association set the stage for the tragic events that would soon transpire. On the night of March 8, 2025, Jonathan returned home earlier than expected. The reasons for his early arrival remain unclear, whether it was a change in work schedule or an intuitive feeling that drew him back. What is known is that his unanticipated return led to a confrontation that would forever alter the lives of those involved. Upon entering his home, Jonathan discovered Jada and Billy together in their marital bed. The shock and betrayal he felt in that moment culminated in a violent outburst. Armed with a knife, Jonathan attacked both Jada and Billy. Billy sustained fatal injuries, while Jada, though severely wounded, survived the assault. In a state of panic, Jonathan attempted to conceal Billy's body by placing it in a trash can located on the property. He then contacted the authorities, reporting the incident. When law enforcement arrived, they found Jonathan at the scene, his clothes stained with blood, and visible injuries on his hands. He was immediately taken into custody. During questioning, Jonathan expressed concern about the ramifications of his actions on his marriage. He reportedly stated, "I am worried about my relationship with my wife due to the fact that I offed him." This admission provided insight into his state of mind following the incident. The community of Dunlap was left in shock. Neighbors and friends struggled to reconcile the violent events with the individuals they thought they knew. Vigils were held in Billy's memory, and discussions about the underlying issues that led to the tragedy became a focal point within the town. As the investigation unfolded, more details emerged about the relationships and circumstances leading up to that fateful night. The case against Jonathan proceeded through the legal system, with the community closely following each development. The incident served as a grim reminder of how quickly lives can be irrevocably changed by unforeseen events. This tragic story underscores the complexities of human relationships and the devastating consequences that can arise from moments of passion and betrayal. As Dunlap continues to heal, the memory of that night remains a poignant chapter in the town's history, reminding all of the fragility of trust and the profound impact of our actions. As dawn broke over Dunlap, Tennessee, on March 8, 2025, the Sequatchie County Sheriff's Office received a distressing call from the emergency room at Erlanger-Sequatchie Hospital. A woman, identified as Jada Golston, had been admitted with multiple stab wounds. Though her injuries were deemed non-life-threatening, the circumstances surrounding the assault were shrouded in mystery. Deputies, sensing the gravity of the situation, immediately set out to uncover the truth. Upon interviewing Jada, deputies learned that the incident had occurred at her residence in the Fredonia community. With urgency, they proceeded to the address, unaware of the grim discovery awaiting them. The modest home stood silent, the morning sun casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of the night's events. Approaching the property, deputies noticed a figure at the doorway, Jonathan Belk, Jada's husband. His clothes were stained with blood, and his demeanor was unsettlingly calm. Visible cuts marked his hands, hinting at a violent confrontation. The officers, maintaining their composure, questioned Jonathan about the events that had transpired. Jonathan's account was chilling. He confessed to returning home unexpectedly and discovering his wife in bed with another man, Billie Jean Floyd, an 18-year-old from Jasper. Overcome with rage, Jonathan admitted to attacking both Jada and Billie. But it was his next revelation that sent a shiver down the deputies' spines. After the assault, he had attempted to conceal Billie's body. With growing apprehension, deputies entered the residence. The interior bore signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and ominous red stains leading toward the kitchen. Following the trail, they were led to a large trash can. Lifting the lid, they discovered Billie's lifeless body, curled into the fetal position, a haunting testament to the night's brutality. The scene was both tragic and perplexing. What could drive a man to such lengths? As investigators meticulously documented the evidence, they couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a simple crime of passion. But what investigators uncovered next would cast a new light on the case, challenging their perceptions and the community's understanding of justice. As dawn's light crept over Dunlap, Tennessee, the Sequatchie County Sheriff's Office was alerted to a stabbing incident that had left the community in shock. The victim, 18-year-old Billie Jean "Lil Bill" Floyd, was discovered lifeless, his body concealed in a trash can. Nearby, Jada Golston was found with multiple stab wounds, though she survived the ordeal. Standing amidst the chaos was Jonathan Belk, husband to Jada, his clothes stained with blood and a haunting calmness in his demeanor. Investigators swiftly secured the scene, collecting evidence that painted a grim picture of the night's events. Blood spatter analysis indicated a violent struggle, with patterns suggesting multiple altercations throughout the residence. The knife, presumed to be the weapon used in the attacks, was recovered from the kitchen sink, still smeared with blood. Forensic teams meticulously documented fingerprints, footprints, and other trace evidence. DNA samples were collected from the knife, the trash can, and various surfaces within the home to establish a comprehensive timeline of the altercation. Autopsy reports later confirmed that Billie Floyd had succumbed to multiple stab wounds, each delivered with significant force. Defensive wounds on his arms and hands indicated a desperate attempt to fend off his attacker. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered layers of complexity. Initial interviews with Jada Golston revealed inconsistencies. She initially claimed that an unknown assailant had attacked her and Billie, but further questioning led to the revelation of her marriage to Jonathan Belk, a detail she had previously omitted. Jonathan Belk's confession added another dimension. He admitted to attacking both Jada and Billie upon discovering them together, expressing concern about the future of his marriage in the aftermath of his actions. The community grappled with the shocking nature of the crime. Billie Floyd, affectionately known as Lil Bill, was remembered as a young man who cherished outdoor activities and family gatherings. His untimely death left a void that resonated deeply among those who knew him. As the investigation progressed, legal proceedings were set in motion. Jonathan Belk faced charges of criminal homicide, with additional charges anticipated. He was detained at the Sequatchie County Jail, awaiting a bond hearing scheduled for March 21. The tragic events of that night left an indelible mark on Dunlap, Tennessee. As the community sought to heal, questions lingered about the circumstances that led to such a violent outcome, and the legal journey that lay ahead for those involved. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence as Jonathan Belk stood trial for the fatal stabbing of Billie Jean "Lil Bill" Floyd, an 18-year-old from Jasper, Tennessee. Belk had been charged with criminal homicide after discovering Floyd in bed with his wife, Jada Golston, at their Dunlap residence on March 8, 2025. Throughout the proceedings, the prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing the sequence of events that led to the tragic outcome. They argued that Belk's actions were premeditated, highlighting his confession and the forensic evidence collected at the scene. The defense, however, portrayed Belk as a man driven to a moment of uncontrollable rage upon discovering his wife's infidelity, suggesting that his actions were a crime of passion rather than premeditated murder. After days of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Belk was found guilty of second-degree murder, acknowledging the heat of the moment but underscoring the severity of his actions. The sentencing phase was equally emotional. Family members of both the victim and the defendant addressed the court, sharing their grief and the profound impact of the incident on their lives. Belk was sentenced to 25 years in prison, a decision that elicited mixed reactions from the community. Some felt justice had been served, while others believed the punishment was too lenient or too harsh, reflecting the complex nature of the case. In the aftermath, the community of Dunlap grappled with the tragedy, seeking ways to heal and prevent such incidents in the future. Discussions about mental health, conflict resolution, and the consequences of impulsive actions became focal points in local forums and community gatherings. This case serves as a poignant reminder of how a single moment of uncontrolled emotion can lead to irreversible consequences, leaving families shattered and communities searching for answers. Underscore 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 underscore. As we reflect on this tragic event, we are reminded of the importance of seeking help and finding peaceful resolutions to conflicts. If you or someone you know is struggling with anger or relationship issues, please reach out to local support services. Together, we can work towards a safer and more understanding community. Story 6. This is the tragic case of Kansas City Chiefs reporter, Adon Manzano. February 5, 2025. A hotel in Kenner, Louisiana. Room 434. The door was locked. The lights were still on. The bed, untouched. And on the floor, face down on a pillow, was the body of 27-year-old journalist Adon Manzano. By all accounts, Adon was healthy, ambitious, and at the peak of his career. He had spent the night before exactly as he had planned, covering one of the biggest sporting events of the year. A trip he had looked forward to. A trip he would never return from. At first, the explanation seemed clear. An overdose, they said. A tragic mix of alcohol and prescription drugs. It wouldn't be the first time a young man, alone in a hotel room, had met such a fate. But this wasn't just another statistic. Because when investigators started looking closer, they saw it almost immediately: things weren't adding up. His phone, missing. His wallet, gone. And the last person to see him alive? Vanished. Surveillance footage revealed a woman entering his room in the early morning hours. She stayed for just under an hour. When she left, she took more than just her belongings. By sunrise, Adán Manzano was gone. And by the time authorities could piece together his final moments, another name entered the investigation, someone working behind the scenes. A second suspect. A man, moving in the shadows. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was something else. And tonight, we uncover the full story, what really happened inside room 434. Because the deeper you look, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Stay with us. And if you want more cases like this, make sure to subscribe. This is just the beginning. To understand what happened that night, we have to understand who Adán Manzano was. Because he wasn't just another visitor passing through Louisiana. He wasn't just another name in the headlines. He was someone with a story, one that should have never ended the way it did. Manzano, a resident of Topeka, Kansas, signed on as a sideline reporter with the Chiefs TV crew at the beginning of the 2024 season. He worked for Telemundo KC and Tico Sports from Kansas City, and was in Louisiana to cover this year's Super Bowl. He was the father of a toddler daughter. Adán was an exceptional professional and a rising star whose dedication and talent reflected excellence in his work, Telemundo KC said of their former colleague. We will deeply miss Adán, his passion for sports and the contributions he made to the local community. That night, Adán had spent hours working. He had been texting friends, checking in with colleagues, making plans for the next day. He was staying at a hotel in Kenner, just outside New Orleans, a quieter, more affordable place, away from the chaos of downtown. Nothing about his night suggested danger. Nothing about his routine pointed to what was coming next. But then, something changed. At 3:47 a.m., Adán walked into his hotel room for the last time. But he wasn't alone. Surveillance footage captured him entering with a woman investigators would later struggle to identify. She followed him inside. The door closed. And for the next 48 minutes, no one knows exactly what happened. What we do know is that at 4:35 a.m., she left. Alone. And by sunrise, Adán Manzano was dead. At first glance, it looked like an overdose. A tragic accident. But something was missing. His wallet. His phone. His valuables, gone. The woman, nowhere to be found. And just as authorities began piecing the puzzle together, a second suspect emerged. Someone moving in the background of Adán's final hours. Someone who, according to police, was part of something far more calculated. The deeper you look into this case, the more unsettling the details become. Because this wasn't just a story about a journalist in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was something else. And the closer investigators got to the truth, the more disturbing the picture became. What really happened inside room 434? And who was behind it? In the hours before his death, Adán Manzano's world seemed perfectly ordinary. On that faithful day, February 4, 2025, he spent the evening preparing for his Super Bowl coverage, checking in with editors, finalizing notes, and exchanging texts with friends. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But as investigators retraced his steps, the timeline of that final night painted a much darker picture, one that raised more questions than answers. At 11:14 p.m., he sent what would be one of his final messages. A simple text, "Gonna call it an early night. Big day tomorrow." But that wouldn't happen. Sometime after midnight, something changed. His texts became sporadic. Shorter replies. Delayed responses. Then, at 2:53 a.m., his phone stopped responding altogether. It was as if, in a matter of minutes, Aidan's plans for the night had taken a sudden detour. By 3:40 a.m., surveillance cameras captured him walking toward the elevators of his hotel. He looked normal. Alert. Not intoxicated. Not distressed. But he wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman. She was well-dressed, composed, and walked with purpose. She wasn't a random stranger off the street. She was someone Adon willingly brought into his hotel room. And 48 minutes later, she was gone. When authorities arrived later that morning, the room itself told a story. And it was a strange one. The bed was untouched. The sheets were crisp. It was as if Adon had never gone to sleep. But his body was found on the floor, face down on a pillow. His wallet, missing. His phone, gone. Any valuables he had with him? Nowhere to be found. There was no sign of forced entry. No struggle. Nothing that immediately pointed to a violent encounter. But something wasn't right. A toxicology report later revealed a combination of alcohol and prescription drugs in his system, enough to cause concern, but not enough to be immediately fatal. And yet, Adon was dead. Manzano's alcohol level was .232 at the time of his death, almost 3 times the legal limit. So how did he die? Authorities believed the answer might lie with the woman who walked out of his room that morning. But finding her would prove far more complicated than they expected. The woman in the footage was careful. She never used her real name. No hotel records. No phone calls linked to Adon. But she wasn't invisible. Surveillance cameras caught her walking through the lobby, exiting the building, and getting into a car parked just outside. And that's when investigators realized she wasn't alone. Behind the wheel of that car was another person. A man. A second suspect, waiting for her. Who was he? And why was he involved? Authorities began piecing together a theory. A scheme involving deception, manipulation, and possibly even premeditated crime. Because the woman who entered that room? She didn't just happen upon Adon Manzano. She was sent there. And whoever sent her was watching. For days, there were no leads. No suspects. But then, a crucial discovery changed everything. Aidan's missing phone was found. Not in his room. Not in the hotel. But in the apartment of the woman seen with Adon Manzano. And on that phone, investigators uncovered a single, chilling detail. Before Adon went silent that night, he had sent one last text to a close friend. 4 words. "I think I'm drugged." Was this a setup? A robbery gone wrong? Or was there something even more calculated at play? As authorities closed in on their suspects, the case took an even darker turn. Because this wasn't the first time this had happened. And Adon Manzano wasn't the first victim. The untimely death of Adon Manzano has ignited a flurry of theories and speculations. As official investigations unfold, the public and online communities have delved into discussions, attempting to piece together the circumstances surrounding this tragic event. Authorities have determined that Manzano's death resulted from the combined toxic effects of Xanax and alcohol, compounded by positional asphyxia. His blood alcohol level was 232, nearly 3 times the legal limit, and he did not have a prescription for Xanax. 2 individuals have been arrested in connection with his death. Danette Colbert, who was originally charged with fraud and theft following Manzano's death last month in a Kenner hotel room. According to Conley, detectives have now rearrested Colbert on a second-degree murder charge. The 48-year-old was captured on security video arriving at the hotel with Manzano, then leaving alone about an hour later. Police allege Colbert used Manzano's credit card in New Orleans after his death. Investigators later recovered the credit card and Manzano's cell phone at Colbert's apartment in Slidell. According to police, Manzano had an anti-anxiety drug commonly sold as Xanax in his system at the time of his death. Colbert remains in the Jefferson Parish Correctional Center. And then the second suspect. Ricky White, an alleged accomplice, charged with simple robbery and fraud, apprehended in Florida. As investigators push forward, new leads and theories continue to emerge, some pointing to a targeted robbery scheme, others suggesting that systemic oversights allowed this tragedy to happen. Every new piece of evidence sparks fresh debate online, where internet sleuths and true crime enthusiasts dissect every detail, sharing theories and challenging the official findings. For now, Adon Manzano's story remains an open case, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the hidden dangers lurking behind seemingly ordinary moments. The investigation is far from over, and as more information comes to light, the public is left to wonder, what really happened inside that hotel room on that fateful night? Why did those responsible vanish into the shadows, and could there have been a way to prevent this tragedy? Story 7. Florida man accused of fatally shooting his wife, a mom of 4, after she filed for divorce. Takeshia Eads was 42 years old. A mother of 4. A woman of faith. To those who knew her, she was strong-willed, soft-spoken, and deeply committed to her family and her church. Her life revolved around her children, and she poured herself into raising them with care and discipline. She worked, she prayed, she showed up for her loved ones. To many, she was the glue that held her family together. Lamar Bryant, her husband, was 41. Described as outgoing, sometimes playful, he had a passion for basketball and mentoring young kids. He spent time coaching youth in the community. Some people saw him as a father figure. Others, as a man who was trying to keep himself together after losing control of things behind closed doors. The two of them had built a life that, at a glance, seemed stable. Their social media pages showed birthday parties, holidays, cookouts, and family road trips. Friends and neighbors saw them smiling in photos, participating in church events, showing up to community gatherings with their children in tow. The Bryants had lived in their neighborhood long enough to become familiar faces. Their kids played with other kids on the street. People waved at them from across the yard. But no one really knew what was happening inside that house. Behind the family photos and the friendly greetings, something had shifted. Their marriage, once steady, had grown tense. Close friends said Takeshia had started withdrawing from certain activities. She stopped posting as often. At church, she smiled less. At home, she spoke less. It wasn't something obvious, it was gradual. A silence that spread across years. A quiet kind of sorrow. At some point, something in Takeshia hardened. Something in her made the decision. She wanted out. Whether it was about safety, sanity, or survival, she had reached the end. On March 19, 2025, she filed for divorce. Filing those papers wasn't just an act of legal separation. For a woman like Takeshia, who believed in vows, family, and faith, it was a decision not made lightly. It was a declaration that the relationship had become unlivable. She wasn't running away from hardship. She was stepping into confrontation, with the courts, with her husband, and with the fear that he would not let her go easily. And he didn't. Lamar Bryant refused to sign the papers. He would not cooperate. And for a man who may have already been struggling with control, this wasn't just a legal disagreement. It was a challenge to his authority. It was rejection. It was abandonment. And it was personal. According to reports, this wasn't the first time Shia had voiced her concerns. It wasn't the first time she had tried to establish boundaries. But the divorce filing made it official. Made it real. And from that moment on, the atmosphere between them grew heavy. Their home turned cold. Their communication, what little was left, dwindled into avoidance and tension. Still, Shia stayed. She remained in the house. The children were still living there. She didn't leave in a rush. She didn't disappear in the middle of the night. Maybe she thought she could manage the transition. Maybe she believed Lamar would eventually accept the decision. Or maybe she knew it was dangerous, but didn't know how dangerous. What we do know is that in the days that followed, Shia carried on with her routines. She went to work. She cared for her children. She prepared dinner. But she also made sure her intentions were clear. She was done. And she wanted out. Shia Eads and Lamar Bryant's relationship began with the promise of a shared future. They met over a decade ago, drawn together by mutual interests and a shared vision for family life. Shia, a devoted mother of 4, was known for her unwavering faith and dedication to her children. Lamar, a year younger, was recognized for his involvement in the community, particularly in mentoring youth through basketball. Their union seemed to embody the values of commitment and partnership. However, as the years unfolded, subtle fissures began to appear beneath the surface of their marriage. Friends and family started noticing changes, moments of tension that hinted at deeper issues. Shia, once vibrant and engaged, became more reserved. She withdrew from certain social activities and her posts on social media grew infrequent and less personal. At church, where she had been an active participant, her smiles became less frequent, and her interactions more subdued. Close confidants observed that Shia's demeanor had shifted. She seemed preoccupied, often lost in thought. While she maintained her responsibilities, caring for her children, attending church, fulfilling work obligations, the spark that once defined her presence was dimming. It was as if she was carrying a burden she chose not to share. Lamar's behavior also exhibited changes. Known for his jovial and approachable nature, he began displaying signs of irritability and impatience. His coaching sessions at the community center, once filled with enthusiasm, occasionally revealed glimpses of frustration. Neighbors overheard raised voices from the Bryant household, disagreements that, while not uncommon in marriages, seemed to be increasing in frequency and intensity. The couple's children, though shielded from the brunt of their parents' conflicts, sensed the growing divide. The household atmosphere grew heavier, conversations became terse, and family outings less frequent. The warmth that once characterized their home was giving way to a cold, unspoken tension. In the weeks leading up to March 2025, Shia made a pivotal decision. After enduring years of mounting strain, she filed for divorce on March 19. This act was not impulsive but the culmination of prolonged contemplation and emotional turmoil. For Shia, who held deep-seated beliefs in the sanctity of marriage and family unity, choosing to dissolve her marriage was profound. It signified a breaking point, a realization that the environment was no longer conducive to her well-being or that of her children. Lamar's reaction to the divorce filing was one of resistance. He refused to sign the papers, effectively stalling the legal process. This refusal was emblematic of deeper issues, an unwillingness to relinquish control and an inability to accept the dissolution of their union. For Lamar, the divorce represented not just the end of a marriage but a personal failure and a public acknowledgement of defeat. The days that followed were fraught with unease. Interactions between Teixeira and Lamar became increasingly strained. While no overt acts of violence were reported during this period, the psychological and emotional distress was palpable. Teixeira confided in close friends about her concerns, expressing fears about the unpredictability of the situation. She was acutely aware of the potential dangers but remained committed to navigating the process with as much grace and dignity as possible. Tragically, the escalating tensions reached a devastating climax on March 25, when Lamar allegedly shot Teixeira in their home, leading to her untimely death. Site-Zero News 19. This horrific event underscored the lethal potential of unresolved domestic conflicts and the critical importance of addressing warning signs before they culminate in tragedy. In the aftermath, Teixeira's eldest daughter, Cordeja Page, emerged as a vocal advocate against domestic violence. She implored others in similar situations to recognize the signs and seek assistance promptly. Her poignant message emphasized the harsh reality that abusive dynamics rarely improve without intervention and that prioritizing the safety and well-being of oneself and one's children is paramount. The story of Teixeira Eads and Lamar Bryant serves as a somber reminder of the complexities of intimate relationships and the critical need for awareness, support, and timely intervention in situations of domestic discord. In the days following Teixeira Eads' decision to file for divorce on March 19, 2025, the atmosphere within the Bryant household grew increasingly strained. Lamar Bryant's refusal to sign the divorce papers was not just a legal impediment, it was a manifestation of deeper emotional turmoil. He perceived Teixeira's move as a direct challenge to his authority and a threat to the familial structure he sought to maintain. March 25, 2025, began like any other day in the Bryant household in Orlo Vista, Florida. Teixeira Eads, a 42-year-old mother of 4, was at home, perhaps contemplating the future she envisioned for herself and her children after filing for divorce just days earlier. Her husband, 41-year-old Lamar Bryant, had been resistant to the idea, refusing to sign the divorce papers. That afternoon, Lamar picked up one of their daughters from school. Instead of heading straight home, he made a detour to a local liquor store, where he purchased and consumed alcohol. Following this, he drove to a storage unit known to his daughter as a place where he kept firearms and illicit substances. Emerging from the unit, Lamar placed 2 firearms on the car's center console before proceeding home. Upon arriving at their residence on West Livingston Street around 3:45 p.m., Teixeira was outside on the porch. She entered the house, heading towards the bathroom. Lamar followed her inside. Moments later, the sharp sound of multiple gunshots echoed through the home. Family members present were startled and rushed to the scene. 2 individuals fled the house in fear. One of Teixeira's daughters confronted Lamar, asking, "What's going on?" He reportedly shrugged and replied, "Nothing," before leaving the premises. Emergency services were immediately contacted. A 911 caller, identified as Teixeira's mother, frantically reported, "My son-in-law shot my daughter." Deputies from the Orange County Sheriff's Office arrived promptly to find Teixeira in the bathroom, suffering from a gunshot wound to the head. She was swiftly transported to a nearby hospital but, tragically, succumbed to her injuries. The devastating loss of Takeshia sent shockwaves through her family and the community. Her eldest daughter, Cordeja Page, described her mother as a loving and selfless woman who touched many lives. She emphasized the importance of recognizing the signs of domestic violence and seeking help, urging others to prioritize their safety and that of their loved ones. In the wake of the tragic shooting of Takeshia Eads on March 25, 2025, law enforcement agencies swiftly mobilized to locate and apprehend Lamar Bryant, the primary suspect in the case. The urgency of the situation was heightened by the fact that Bryant had fled the scene immediately after the incident, leaving the community in shock and mourning. The Orange County Sheriff's Office, leveraging both traditional investigative techniques and modern technology, tracked Bryant's movements to a residence in Kissimmee, Florida. Acting on this intelligence, deputies approached the location with caution, fully aware of the potential dangers posed by a suspect considered armed and dangerous. Their objective was clear: to apprehend Bryant without further incident and ensure the safety of all involved. Upon arrival, law enforcement officers established a perimeter around the residence and initiated contact with Bryant. After a period of negotiation, Bryant surrendered without resistance, allowing deputies to take him into custody peacefully. The arrest was a testament to the professionalism and preparedness of the officers involved, who managed to resolve a volatile situation without further harm. Following his apprehension, Bryant was transported to the Orange County Jail, where he was booked on charges of first-degree murder. The gravity of the charge reflected the severity of the allegations against him, and the legal process began to unfold. During his initial court appearance, the presiding judge denied Bryant bail, citing the serious nature of the crime and potential flight risk. This decision underscored the court's commitment to ensuring that justice would be served without compromise. The community's reaction to the arrest was a complex mix of relief and sorrow. While there was a collective sense of relief that the suspect was in custody, it was overshadowed by the profound grief over the loss of Takeshia Eads. Vigils were held in her honor, with community members gathering to pay their respects and support her grieving family. The tragedy sparked conversations about domestic violence and the importance of recognizing and addressing its warning signs. Family members, particularly Takeshia's eldest daughter, Cordeja Page, became vocal advocates for domestic violence awareness. In interviews, Page emphasized the critical need for individuals in abusive situations to seek help and prioritize their safety and that of their children. Her heartfelt messages resonated with many, shedding light on the often hidden struggles faced by victims of domestic abuse. As the legal proceedings against Lamar Bryant progressed, the community remained vigilant, seeking justice for Takeshia and hoping for a resolution that would bring some measure of closure to a deeply painful chapter. The case served as a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the imperative need for societal support systems to protect and assist those at risk. In the aftermath of Takeshia Eads' tragic death, law enforcement initiated a comprehensive investigation to uncover the circumstances and motives behind the incident. The meticulous process involved crime scene analysis, forensic examinations, and a thorough review of Lamar Bryant's actions leading up to the event. Upon arrival at the residence on West Livingston Street, deputies secured the area to preserve potential evidence. The bathroom, where Takeshia was found, became the focal point. Forensic specialists documented the scene through detailed photography and sketches, noting the position of Takeshia's body, blood spatter patterns, and any ballistic evidence. The trajectory of the gunshot was analyzed to determine the shooter's position, and spent shell casings were collected for ballistic comparison. The firearms retrieved from Bryant's storage unit were subjected to ballistic testing. This process aimed to match the bullets and shell casings from the crime scene to the weapons in Bryant's possession. Additionally, gunshot residue tests were conducted on Bryant's clothing and hands to establish whether he had recently discharged a firearm. Fingerprint analysis was performed on the weapons and other pertinent items to confirm possession and handling. Investigators delved into Bryant's digital footprint, examining his search history, text messages, and social media activity. They sought evidence of premeditation or threats toward Teixeira. While specific details of these findings have not been publicly disclosed, such analyses are standard in building a comprehensive understanding of a suspect's mindset and intentions. Bryant's criminal history revealed multiple arrests in 2023 for alleged drug offenses, including selling cocaine and fentanyl. At the time of the shooting, he was out on bond from a recent arrest earlier in March 2025 for allegedly selling cocaine, despite having an outstanding warrant for fleeing from police. These prior legal issues painted a picture of escalating criminal behavior. The investigation uncovered that Teixeira had recently filed for divorce, a move Bryant opposed by refusing to sign the papers. This refusal indicated a reluctance to accept the dissolution of their marriage and suggested potential motives rooted in personal and emotional conflicts. The cumulative evidence, from forensic findings to behavioral analyses, contributed to the charge of first-degree premeditated murder against Lamar Bryant. The detailed investigation underscored the complexities of domestic violence cases and highlighted the critical need for timely intervention and support for those at risk. In the pursuit of justice for Teixeira Eads, the legal proceedings against Lamar Bryant have unfolded with significant developments. On March 26, 2025, Lamar Bryant was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder following the fatal shooting of his wife, Teixeira Eads. During his initial court appearance, Bryant was denied bond and remained incarcerated without bond thereafter. Court records indicate that Bryant's subsequent court date was scheduled for Monday, April 1, 2025. This hearing was anticipated to address matters related to the ongoing investigation and legal proceedings. The Eads family continues to navigate the profound grief of their loss. Teixeira's daughter poignantly reflected on her mother's legacy, stating, "She touched a lot of people, and she touched a lot of lives, so she was a good woman." As the legal process advances, the Eads family and the broader community remain steadfast in their pursuit of justice for Teixeira. The case has intensified discussions on domestic violence awareness, emphasizing the necessity for vigilance and support systems to protect individuals in vulnerable situations. With the trial proceedings underway, the Eads family continues to seek justice for their beloved Teixeira. The community stands united, advocating for accountability and reflecting on the broader implications of domestic violence. I invite you to share your thoughts, your perspectives, your experiences. What can we learn from this? How can we change the narrative? And if these stories, these slow, immersive explorations into real events, matter to you, I encourage you to subscribe for more. More stories that don't just recount facts, but take you through the moments that shaped them. More voices that question, analyze, reflect. More time to pause. To absorb. To think. The weight of true crime can linger long after a story ends. Some cases haunt us, some leave us unsettled, and some, like this, remind us of the fragility of life. As we come to the end of today's story, take a moment to breathe. To let the tension release. To let the mind settle into the quiet again. The world carries many stories. Some unsettling. Some heartbreaking. Some that leave us searching for answers. But in this moment, there is only stillness. As you settle into rest tonight, let the calm settle over you. Our background sounds will carry you into tranquility as you drift towards sleep. Thank you for being here, and until next time, stay safe and take care.